Well, thank you so much for staying with the Daybreak. You can tweet at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. Let's have a conversation around the MSMEs, how significant the deal between Kenya and the US is, and what more needs to be done to make MSMEs more stable in Kenya. Joining me now in studio is Samuel Karanja, is the CEO MSME Alliance. Thank you for making time. And Carol Karaoke, CEO KEPSA, Kenya Private Sector Alliance. They witnessed the signing of that deal between the US and Kenya, and she's going to explain to us how significant this is. She's joining us online. Carol, thank you so much for making time for us, because you were there firsthand. How significant is this deal, and what is it really about?
So let me begin by where this all began.
Yeah.
So for a long time, what we've been working on is the policies around SMEs, just creating an enabling environment so that we can have SMEs develop and grow in the country. And so we worked on the SME bill in 2012. Right now we're working on the SME policy. We worked on credit guarantee under the roundtable with the president. We worked on movable properties, all that. So we've been working on the business environment. Then we started saying, beyond that, can we move away from just the creation of SMEs, because the environment helps the SMEs to be created, to where we are moving to scale up of SMEs. And that's when we started saying, let's work on programs now that scale up SMEs. And so that a lot happened around COVID, because when we did our surveys of COVID on impact of businesses, we always saw that SMEs were the most affected beyond any other size companies, and for good reasons, of course, because they're small. And so we came up with several programs, and two of them, the most important, which are precursor to this initiative, is we worked on with MasterCard Foundation on free interest loans that we've already done about 400 SMEs. It's a revolving fund, and so they pay up in 6 months, and so as many pay off, then we'll bring others on board. Then we said with lockdowns, not only in Kenya, but around the world, part of the struggle for SMEs is exactly the market and being able to operate, because then the places have locked down. And so we came up with the e-commerce booster program. So how do we get SMEs to trade and do business online? Because not many of them understand how to do that. And we started telling them, having a page on Facebook is not doing business, is not e-commerce. It's a good advertising of what you produce and what you sell, but it's not doing e-commerce. And so we came up with a booster program, basically to train them and tell them they are actually platforms for e-commerce. And this is how they look like, this is what you have to do. And so we've been training, and we wanted to train 2,000 to begin with. We ended up with 2,500, 1,600 of them are already using those platforms. Then beyond that, we said, okay, what else is available? As they do the e-commerce, most of them are being able to access maybe the local market, the regional market. But how do they start accessing some of those other foreign markets? And so how do we get them to access the foreign markets? What is available out there and also in the country? Again, how do they start using trade agreements that are already existing? And so with my counterpart in the US from CCA, Flory, we sat down in June, actually, this year, as recent as that. And we said, even the SMEs in America, and especially those that are owned by women and minorities, also struggle to do business internationally. And yes, now with COVID, everyone needs to move beyond their comfort zones. And if they're going to use these e-commerce platforms or any other channels, they need to understand. They need to understand agreements like AGOA. Yeah. The Africa Growth Opportunity. They need to understand how the logistics are done. They need to have the information. They need to have the training, but they also need financing. And so because we already identified financing when we're dealing with this, the local ones, to make sure that they don't die off, how do we get that? And then we moved from the focus of just creating SMEs to making SMEs grow. And so our focus right now is scaling up SMEs. So so the environment is there to create many, but many die after 4 or 5 years. So how do we scale them up so they don't die, they grow? Because even what we see as multinationals today started as small SMEs. And so that's how we came up with this program. Yeah. And so it's focused on those premises. It's to train, to give information, to help them access financing, to help them with the logistics, to access the two markets. So whether you're an American SME and you want to access Kenyan markets, or you're a Kenyan SME and you want to access American markets. And so once we do this, we'll be able to replicate it in other countries. And so we're very fortunate because we've worked with the president very closely on these business environment areas for SMEs, all for businesses, but even the ones that are very focused on SMEs. And so we asked him, can you be here to witness this? Because then it also will hold us accountable to make it happen. And also get the support of your administration, because we will need that to be able to do the logistics and to be able to access the information we need between the two countries. And so that's really what happened.
So if a trader is listening to you this morning, where do they begin?
So right now, what we're doing now is putting the strategy. So putting the training program together, putting what the logistics are, simplifying what AGOA is for SMEs, because we realize we have about like 5,000 products that Africa can access the American market without tariffs, but we use about maybe 5 or 10%, and yet we have another 3 years before we can think about, as we think about what will follow up AGOA. Of course, there are a lot of other negotiations for other agreements to follow up, but we want to be able to carry this to follow, to continue even after AGOA is done. And so that's what we're putting together. So we'll be putting the strategy, we'll be putting out the information. We'll begin with the ones we have. So we have an SME club in KEPSA. And also what we've done in KEPSA is to make sure we have simplified the membership for SMEs and startups so that they're able to join at a very, very small fee, and so that they can access all this information. We already have, as part of this program, so when the American side is working with some of the institutions that fund SMEs, and we had some in the meeting, we're already funding some SMEs in Kenya and doing very good business, but we want them to scale up and fund more, and so that those SMEs can scale up. We also are working with our own institutions in the country, and we already have Dr. Manu Chandaria, who's already put a 5 million revolving fund to support SMEs, and we'll be encouraging other big businesses to do, because the other part of this, beyond that, is accessing the market, accessing the value chains, is to access the value chains of the big companies, because SMEs can feed a lot into the value chain. So we'll also be trying to expose them to the big value chains, whether they are big stores in the US or big companies in Kenya, much more than we have done before, so they can access those value chains and do business.
Okay. Sam, what is needed for SMEs and MSMEs to scale up? And first, I'd like to get your reaction about the deal that has just been signed in the US.
Thank you, Trevor. I think that's a very positive deal that has happened in the US. Yeah. Number one, because small, medium entrepreneurs, they are the driving force of this economy. And so when the government now gets such initiatives and makes sure that they are operational here in the country, I think it's a very big plus to small, medium entrepreneurs, because basically we want SMEs to have larger markets, extensively, not only regionally, but also internationally. Yeah. But having said that, I think we have a challenge in the products. As Caroline has said, AGOA has about 5,000 products. We only access to 10% of that. And the reason why we do that is because when you want to upscale SMEs, we mean production, we mean coming up with goods which have the quality that the US market can be able to absorb. And so you find that many times you don't have that capacity as small, medium entrepreneurs. Number one, because of the capacity or because of the cost of production. So you're going to find that for us to be able to get to get that quality that is needed, we have to spend a lot of money, which now the product at the tail end of the product, it can't be costed as a product that has been manufactured or brought up in in China. Yeah. One of the products that Kenya has been able to push in the US through AGOA is agricultural products, things like coffee and tea. And when you look at that, we are talking about very large scale, farmers. So when you're scaling it down to small, medium entrepreneurs, we mean that things like iron sheets, building capacity to that, things like wires, building capacity to that. These small products, mobile phone accessories, building capacity to that we can be able to produce locally and sell internationally. And so the upscaling will take a lot of energy, it took a lot of time, but also goodwill from the government to make sure that the production cost has been lowered down because the power cost in Kenya is very expensive, whereby now if you want to produce something, it's not competitive for us to produce here and even sell in this market. It's easier, Trevor, to produce in South Africa or to set up base in South Africa and sell in Kenya than set base in Kenya and sell in Kenya. So that is the challenge that we have with, with SMEs. The other challenge that we're going to have is SMEs lack corporate governance. Corporate governance in the sense, and I think Karen has alluded to that. How many SMEs do we have in the country, and how many SMEs do you want to upscale? Because ideally we have about 7.1 million SMEs in Kenya. Only 1.56 SMEs are licensed. So we mean about 5.8 million SMEs are not licensed. So how many SMEs do you want to upscale, and in which sectors do you want to do that? Now, why aren't the 5.6 million SMEs unlicensed? Why are they not licensed? One, because of the taxation policies that we have in the country. So we have a lot of work, and the government has a lot of work to do to be able to give confidence to this sector, so that this sector can be able to manage to grow into that, corporate thing, that corporate entity. If you look at what government did to Matatu, bringing sanity to Matatu, and they're also doing that to Boda Boda, they were able to deal with Matatus by helping them set up circles. So that now they don't deal with an individual. They don't deal with Trevor, who has a matatu. They don't deal with Karanja, who has a matatu. But they are dealing with an entity that has its own self-regulatory mechanisms internally. That they can say we have 50 matatus and these are the owners, so these are SACCO. So for SMEs, one of the strategies is to make sure that they have organized entities, whether they are associations or, associations or alliances, so that now those association or alliances can be able to have an internal mechanism to vet and to see sectors which can be able now to be upgraded and upscaled, and also bring other people on board.
All right. Carol, what do you make of what Karanja is saying? Because he's raised some very fundamental issues. First, on quality and capacity in relation to the cost of production. How is this going to be addressed so that it is competitive for the MSMEs to even get indulged in this trade?
So there are two things, and I like what Karanja is saying. So there are those SMEs that are already producing some quality products, but they don't know how to access those international markets. So this helps them to access as we work on the logistics for them, but also we link them with the stores and all that. So there are already some, and especially COVID did, the positive side of COVID has made us Kenyans, when the global trade logistics seemed not to work because of COVID, people started relying on the local. But because of that, started demanding quality. And so SMEs and companies are moving to more quality products, because then there was a market for that, than before, when people could import from China, Turkey, and everywhere else. So there are those already who are ready to access the market. Then there are those who need to be helped to be able to do quality. And what we've realized, we're also living in the technology days. So a company in the US, a store in the US does not need to fly all the way to Kenya to help with quality. They can do it once and say, this is the kind of quality, train and everything. But then they can continue to monitor that online, because all I need to do is get online, get through YouTube or through any other channels, and be able to be walked through and even see the company I'm buying from, how they're going through their production process. And they can help them improve. You know how we've been having medicine, even telesurgeries and all that, with doctors from different places and using the same technology. It's the same thing that will happen with this. So it will make it so much cheaper, even for those who are buying, to be able to work with these SMEs at the local level. Because all we just need to make sure that they have access to internet and they can be walked through on the types of quality they need. Then we also need to, part of the training is also to help them, because many of them are very good at making 1 to 10 items, and they're high quality. But when you tell them produce en masse for a store like Macy's in the US, then they can't they can't produce the exact same bag that they produced as 1 to 10 to get to maybe 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000. And so that's where the training comes in. And so the information, the training, and then saying, okay, if I need 3,000, I need to produce 3,000 to sell to Macy's. What kind of funding do I need? Where do I access that funding? And so that's why we're working with institutions both in Kenya and in the US to help those who need that kind of funding to be able to do that, to be able to produce en masse. Because if you're going to start producing for a market like the US, we have to focus on quality and quantity. So we can't just focus on quality. Quality is easy because then maybe I'm producing 10 items. But when we start producing en masse to serve a population like the US, then we have to focus on the quantity side also. And that means that we have to focus on the funding side as well as maintaining the quality, because then again, you don't want to start something and then you lose your contract because you couldn't maintain the quality. And that's why you've seen, and that's how countries like China grew, because these companies in the US also moved and produced there. And that's another part. So these SMEs can also partner with some of these large corporates, and the corporates can move in some of their part of their operations into Kenya and work with these SMEs and be able to produce for them for the market. The same thing will happen on this side. The SMEs on this side that want to be able to access the Kenyan market, whether they're from minority or women or youth, will also be helped in the same way. So with my counterpart, that's why. To be clear, this is not a government program. It's supported by government, and that's why we needed them, because there's a lot of information that they hold. They're able to help where we have in regulations and issues of logistics, but it's a private sector to private sector. So it's between KEPS and CCA, so that we are the ones who hold the businesses from both sides. So we'll work with those businesses and get the support of government where we need government to play its role in terms of regulations and policy and all that.
So, Carol, when it comes to capacity building, do you think mergers and consolidations will help in that, and to address somehow what Karanja was saying, that some people may be good, they can produce quality stuff, but they can only do it on a small scale. So is it better then if we do mergers and consolidations, whereby a team of people who are making bags then are brought in together and they make many bags that then can be exported? Or will that then kill the competition and then it doesn't make sense at the end of it all?
No. I think Karanja is right. I think we need to explore all models. You may have an SME that is easy to scale because it's on that trend already and can produce that in terms of large scale. But there are others who will need to come together as 2, 3 come together, and as we was using the idea of the Matatu Circle, and then be able to move together. So the idea is to explore all models that work, and different products will use different models. So we are not going to use one shoe fits all, because then that will not work. And then also the issue of competition is not. I think we also need to understand competition differently. I think we sometimes understand competition. If Trevor is doing something, then I need to make sure that I do it better so that Trevor loses the market. No, competition is the idea of can we do more so that we both succeed. That's good competition, not where we bring each other down, because then we both pay. Because who knows, tomorrow I may need a baton from Trevor, but if he's not there, then I also lose my business. But if Trevor is growing and I'm growing, we'll also start depending on each other, and we'll all grow together, and we'll also be able to depend on each other. So that's the whole idea. So coming together like circles do, that would be important for some of the areas. Some of the ones who are already ready to scale and all they need is maybe information, or they just need logistics, or they need financial capacity, or they need some certain training, then we'll do that. So what we're working now is on strategies for each of those areas so that we can say, where do we begin? And remember, there's already some business happening. Some are already accessing let me use the Kenyan side, already accessing the American market, either in small scale, and others, and using their Goa platform. Others are not using their Goa platform, but they're still accessing the market, because as we know, there are people who come up and net that gap in terms of logistics. Then there are others who do small scale and use suitcases through their relatives and their friends to carry this stuff. And those are the people who also want to help. So the scaling is at different levels depending on where different SMEs are at.
Yeah. Karanja, how would these mergers work, for example? Because if, say, for example, I own company A that can make 500 bags, why would I be interested in coming together with company B, which can make 300 bags, and company C, which makes 200 bags, and yet I can make 500 just because the international market wants 1,000 bags? How would these mergers work so that it's not it's a give and take.
I think it's about looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
When you look at the US, the population and the appetite of the product probably you're selling, it's going to inform why you should merge. Because ideally, when you look at, let's say, for example, you're making 500 bags, Kiondos or Curios, and the market there is probably your target market, maybe in Seattle, maybe Atlanta, and they can be able to maybe consume the 500. Why don't you go to the 50-something states or 54 states, or even take a percentage of maybe 5 or 10 states? So when you look at the capacity that, the appetite that you want to, to quench, you are looking at how many people you're going to come together. And I think business is about strategic partnership. You can't be able to, to do it alone. You have to be able to merge together so that you can be able to access to the wider market. And let me give an example to what Caroline has said. We have some relatives in the US, and what happens is that probably if you have some products, maybe during summer, maybe you can get these Masai shukas, you can get these sundresses made in Kenya, you can get these sandals, just to go and sell there. And even sometimes you find that Kenyans even come together who are in the US, who are in the diaspora, and probably they have even, let's say, for example, a Kenya Day, whereby they can be, they decide to showcase, their wares and also sell some of the things from their relatives. When you look at the market in the US, the demand of the things in the market in the US, they can't be able to meet that demand. And that is why it's important for these mergers to come together. Number two, when you also look at the financing, so you may find that by you producing 500, you can be able to bring all your synergy together, financial muscles together, through venture capitalists. You can also angel investors coming together and making sure that you have a wider financial base and a stronger financial base to be able to push the market. Because the more forceful you enter into a market, the better for you. So you find that you may want to grow progressively, but the market is so ruthless that any person who comes with the financial muscles is able to take it all. And I can give an example with Kenya. Look at what Chinese are doing in Kenya. The importers from China, some of them who are our members, they buy through small things, and they fill in a container by buying small spaces in a container, and by buying a cubic meter, 1 or 2. But you find that some Chinese business people have been able to come and, had issues, come together with their government and get financial help. And so they are bringing about 50 or 20 containers or 100 containers. Obviously, even when they are bargaining from the other end, they are not going to sell it at the same price. And so you find, because of their financial muscle, they are able to bring more commodities in they are able to flood the market and to edge out most of the people who don't have the financial muscles. And so for us to be able to access to the US market, we have to have these strategic partnerships. And it also brings a lot of expertise. So one person may bring the marketing side of it. For example, Caroline is talking about e-commerce. That's a marketing placement. So you have to bring people who are strategic enough to be able to adapt to what you're doing, because one is going to bring the management initiative or the management strength, the other one is going to bring the financial strength, the other one is going to bring the marketing strength. So those strategic partnerships and synergies is what the SMEs need to be able to build their capacity. But when you look at the challenge of SMEs is that some of us, we don't like the strategic partners.
Yeah.
So you want to go it alone.
Yeah.
I can give an example of you may find like 10 people, they're in a plane going to China to get the same thing. Why don't they come together
and send one person? And
send just one person who's just going to use one ticket.
Yeah.
Is going to use one hotel, and is not going to eat a lot of food because they are 10. And so when they go there, for example, if they come together as 10, they can be able to bargain for better deals. Maybe they can even get a deal of 10 containers. Then why should you have 15 people in a plane? Yeah. And you meet at the same point, buying the same commodity and coming back again. So it's a time to change the model of how we are going to do business, yeah, and also to be strategic in how we do business.
Yeah. And Carol, from this perspective of changing the model, one of the things that is also coming up is financing. And that is where really the rubber meets the road. I mean, how do you decide that this SME will be financed? How much do they get? And then there's the issue of also loans. They barely can access loans.
I think because of working with different institutions fund different aspects, others fund different products. others fund different sizes of SMEs. So working with them, we'll be able to classify and say, if you are here are the different institutions, and then be able to explain what each institution does and how they fund, if it's on the funding side. Remember, finance, as I said, is finance and credit is just one side. And let me give credit to Kenyan banks. They've really worked hard to have an SME portfolio. And so many of them are really funding SMEs and for different areas, So there's a credit available now for SMEs by different banks. There's also now, and especially with government support on the issue of credit guarantee, that's really, really helping. So there are products that the banks already locally had started providing. There's also the credit guarantee by the government, which is now helping banks more to support SMEs. But there are also institutions, both local and foreign, that support SMEs. And even big companies that are not banks. There are many that have SME programs, whether they are value chain programs to integrate SMEs into their value chains. They're already there. And so it's to expose a lot of this to more SMEs. So what we realize, the bigger problem is actually in access to information. It's always been one of the big problems that we've always found for SMEs. And so get a lot of this information and exposed to many SMEs. As I said, when we started with the e-commerce, we targeted 2,000 and then up to 2,500, because once people have information, then they come on board. The 400 SMEs for the loans. We have so many requests. We just don't have enough money for that. We also have a third program, which is training and mentoring, that we do virtual mentoring every Friday. On average, we have about 400 to 500 SMEs that log in for 2 hours every Friday. So in the last 1 year since we started, we've done almost 1,000 sessions, and they are so popular. So we realize people are hungry for information, and once people have information, they know what to do. So that's a big thing. And then the reason why we said let's work with America, because with the American SMEs also, or the US market, because the US market is also very large, and so access to markets has also been always a big challenge for SMEs. And so, as we said, instead of just them competing within the local market and the regional market, let's expose them to other markets. And because we've had a relationship through AGOA with the US, why can't we take advantage of that and also find other opportunities and then be able to do the same? We have UK-Africa trade agreements, and we have other agreements of other opportunities. We continue to do that with other countries. So that's really how we are looking at this, so that there are different products for different sizes of SMEs and different types of SMEs in terms of products and all that. And then moving a lot of them to production, because then also doesn't help if they're importing from, let me use the case of China, bringing to China and then now selling to the US market. Then we're not actually growing the jobs and the wealth for the country. We really want them to produce, and they can. They are innovative. People are so entrepreneurial, and when you see, and you and I, we don't have to even say anything. We've seen what they've been producing, and the last 1 year has been amazing in terms of the products they've been able to produce. No longer traditional. Many times we knew SMEs, if they were producing anything, they're only producing what we saw in the Masai market. But now that's not what they're doing. They're producing great leather bags that can be sold to $300, $400 US dollars. They're producing, kitchen utensils. They're producing a lot of interior decor items that are so good that we all used to buy online from other countries, or when we travel to those countries. Now we can produce, but then we don't want them to produce only 5 to 10 items every other day. We want them to scale up and produce more. And if we are going to go for the US market, scale is important so that we have the numbers.
Yeah. Karanja, what would be the best approach when it comes to financing? What is the best solution to this from an MSME Alliance perspective?
I think you should have tailor-made kind of approach towards financing, because that's a very big handle in terms of businesses. Let me give an example to what Karen was also saying. Because of COVID, so many businesses closed down, and so many people are not able to do business. And so where do we start with such people? Where do we start with people who had businesses? They had already established themselves, but because of COVID, they can't be able to do businesses. And so I think we should have a tailor-made kind of approach towards that, whereby we have financial institutions which can be able to address to that, even through, and I give an example with SACCOs. Sometimes when we approach the banks, you find that the banks have they have very stringent policies, financial policies based because of Central Bank of Kenya policies, and so they can't be able, because of the capping, they can't be able now to go down, towards assisting SMEs, and that's why you find that SMEs now have gone they have gone to look for money elsewhere. They have gone to look for money through crowdfunding, which is not well established and known in Kenya. Yeah. But in the US, you find that there are people, crowdfunding does very well in the US. They also go in angel investors, whereby you can talk to your friend, and your friend sees, this is where you are, this is where you are, and this is where you are going, and so I can be able to invest in you. And also venture capitalist, where you find that you can come together and own part of, the business. And so these are some of the avenues, and I'm looking at like even the private sector having its own wing of fund, making sure that they are able to fund these small medium entrepreneurs, instead of like what KEPSA is doing. Instead of going to the bank or going to the SACCOs, why can't we also have an initiative, like for established associations or alliances or the private sector, whereby come and sit down with individuals who have been in business and who want to be in business, and even getting startups, listen to them, because there are so many people who have established startups which are today they are worth billions of dollars. So let's listen, have a listening ear, and come up with initiatives whereby we can listen to these people. There's a program I think I was watching one time on YouTube. It's called The Lion's Den, where you come and listen to people, business people coming and listening to people. We have our own local one, I think, whereby you find that there are business people who want to venture into or to assist other business people, remain afloat in their businesses. Yeah. But when you look at banks of other financial institutions, it may be very limiting. So like what KEPSA is doing, going out of the known to the unknown, people who are out there who are willing to bring in funds, maybe in a pool, and decide we want to fund small medium entrepreneurs. Now the categorization of who you are going to find is also to fund is also very key. Let it not be the very high SMEs, because you're not talking about SMEs, you're talking about I didn't see the micro, I just saw the SME, so is small medium entrepreneurs. But what about the micro? I can give an example. One of the frontiers that we can take advantage of is agribusiness. So US is a huge consumer of avocados. So the avocados, they come from Brazil, they also come from Mexico. Why? For example, if I have, let's say, for example, 10 trees, how can I be assisted? So you're looking at the micro, then small, so that you can be able to build capacity from the micro to small to medium entrepreneurs. So let's not raise the bar so high that even the micro cannot be able to reach, and we just focus on the medium, because ideally the medium entrepreneurs are the ones basically who have information. As Caroline is saying, that information is power, and a good number of SMEs, they don't have that information of where can I sell these products. So when you look at the micro, they are devoid of information, and so they are thriving in ignorance. So we must make sure that we pump information, and that information should be very consumable, to very basic, business language. That's what we call it, business language, that they can be able to understand that this is the opportunities which are there, and you can be able to penetrate these opportunities using this route. And so KEPSA, being on the forefront doing that, they should also, I think, have strategic partners in the country. Other players like ourselves, MSME Alliance of Kenya, and other alliances and associations which manage small medium entrepreneurs or micro MSMEs, so that now we can be able to come up with data, we can be able to vet our members who are able now to access to such kind of markets and financing. And so the financing part of it should be tailor-made, and ideally should not be left to financial institutions which have very stringent, financial policies. Let it be out there that I can be able to walk into a KEPSA office, I can be able to walk in a MSME Alliance of Kenya office and be heard and get some money to kickstart my business or to resuscitate my business. But going down to banks can even tell you that the government is borrowing more money than us. Why? Because of the capping. The government comes and gives better rates, and so ideally they are going to gravitate towards the government, which is low risk, than Karanja, who they don't know whether he's going to pay based on his capacity.
Yeah.
So I think that the initiative of tailor-making and having other private, the private sector itself initiate that aspect of financing, I think, is very key.
Yeah. Carol, I'd like to hear your views on this, on tailor-making the financing of MSMEs. What are your thoughts on this?
I think I'll say it. I think I'd said that, or I alluded to it, that I said no one shoe fits all.
Yeah.
So you've got to meet SMEs to where they are. And the reason why I just say SMEs, because when you talk about small, it's all different sizes, from a one-man show to, their category, there's a way they're categorized until maybe an SME that employs one person, or to the SMEs that employ up to 5 people, and those are the small, then you go to the mediums and all that. And so the products are different. Is the products, as I said, banks have specific products for SMEs, and many banks now are doing very well to have those products. Not all banks, but many of the banks have all those products, from Equity to KCB to ABSA to Standard, and others have Stanbic and others have products just for SMEs. Then we have in financial institutions that are geared also to SMEs, that focus on SMEs, in terms of funding, access to markets, information, and all that. Then we're also doing our own support, because we said we have to have different products. And that's why I talked about our SME, our MasterCard partnership with MasterCard Foundation, where we have funding and this is for the very small ones, actually, because we only fund up to 1.5 million per SME for 6 months, which is interest-free, because these are the ones that we know will be are hard-pressed to be able to pay interest. And so this has no collateral, has no interest. That's for the very micro. Then, of course, then there is the other, but that's for that level. Then there's the banks level, there's the other institutions, and those institutions are both local and foreign. I also talked about how we're getting, then we also have other like companies who are starting to do the same, who are not banks or financial institutions, but they are companies like Dr. Manu Chandaria, the Copcraft, that has already given us a revolving fund of they've started with 5 million, and that's to interest many other companies, whether you're in ICT or you're also in manufacturing or whichever sector you are, to be able to put into this revolving fund again, so that we can again lend to SMEs. And this fund we will do the same way, will not charge interest, so that we can reach to the very, very micro. Then we have the other companies who are integrating SMEs into their own value chains. And I like what Karanja talked about, like when he gave the example of avocado. One of the things that we hope, one of the things we are targeting with the direct flights is also to see how do we start competing with the avocados that are coming from Mexico, and because Kenya has many varieties, so we can still access the American market and be competitive with Mexico. But it's work with the big companies that are able to bring scale, but they also work with farmers. A farmer with 10 trees, another one with 20 trees, another one with 30 trees, and at the end of the day, because of that consolidation, the whole idea of like the circle thing, then they're able to come together and be able to produce, to have large scale. Whether they come together in one group and they're able to put together and have large scale and export together, or work with some of the big companies. We already have one of the I'm just trying to remember the name. It's very late this side, so forgive me if I forget some terms. Who does a big horticulture and avocado, mostly to Europe. Already now they're starting to, we've opened the China market, so working through that, but hopefully to get to the American market. And Sunripe, and Sunripe work, they have their own farms, but they also work with local farmers. And so having more Sunripes who will do that, so that every SME, so that farmer who has 10 trees, remember this is about scale up. Yeah. So we don't want that farmer to keep with 10 trees. We want that farmer in another 3 years to be with 50 trees, or to have had 10 trees of avocado and now they have 10 trees of oranges, So our focus is scale up. So because we already have the environment to create SMEs, we want to be able to scale up the SMEs. We don't want them to remain small, because today we have to have our own multinationals. We have to create our own multinationals. And multinationals will not start as multinationals. They all start as SMEs. And so if we don't focus on the scale up, we'll never have our own multinationals. Think about it. We have ACFTA now, the African Free Trade Area and Agreement. And we want to be able to access that, but we can't access that if we remain small, So we have to grow our own SMEs. So they are big companies and large companies. So they create jobs, enough jobs. They create the wealth for the country, and then be able to access opportunities and investments outside Kenya. So a small SME that is maybe just doing 5 bags may not be able to have the capacity to go and set up in Nigeria. But if we scale up that SME to produce 5 bags, from producing 5 bags to maybe 1,000 bags, now they can move and set up shop, or go and set up a production in Nigeria or in another part of Africa. So that's really our focus. So our vision is scale up. Our vision is big. How do we grow big? How do we start saying we have multinationals that come from Africa? We have multinationals that come from Kenya, And I'll give you a good example from the financing sector and use Equity Bank. It's a local bank, started as a small farmers bank, Now it's out in the region. It's going beyond the region to the rest of Africa. That's what we want to see. We want more equities. We want another 10 equities in the financial sector. We want another Bitcoin. When you read the stories of things like of companies like Bitcoin, how they started, with the former, now it's on second generation, with the generation that started, or Compcraft and others, they all started that small, But how can we need to grow more of our indigenous ones? And as we said, what did those guys have? They had the same things: access to market, access to information, access to credit and financing, and all that. So let's do more of that so that we can scale up.
Okay. Let me take a quick break here on Daybreak. When you come back, I see some of your questions and your comments on this. And also when you come back, we'll talk about the Buy Kenya, Build Kenya initiative and the licensing also of SMEs. That coming up in just a bit. Keep your views coming in, your questions at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. See you shortly.
I did not instruct you to kill Oliver. The plan was just to expose him.